Well, we're making good progress on this bulldozer price regression problem. In the last video, we tried to build a machine learning model. We learned that we've got some data that isn't in numeric format. So see here, we've got some strings, and if we check df, oh, actually, we're working with dftemp, my bad. See, these are things that you're gonna forget, that you're gonna go through, that you're gonna mix up. So dftemp, still same problem, right? Because we've got some values here, some columns that are numeric, and a whole bunch that aren't. So what can we do about that? Well, oh, not even, Daniel, what are you doing? You're not even working with your temporary data frame. Okay. Well, this is all part of the game, right? Making mistakes and then going back and fixing them. That's part of being a data scientist. Heaps of experimentation. So one way we can turn all of our string data or non-numeric data into numbers is by converting them into pandas categories. So that's, oh, what's that mean? So convert strings to categories. Now we'll put it here. One way we can turn all of our data into numbers is by converting them into pandas categories. So like the date time object that we saw when we imported sale date, pandas has another data type called category. Let's have a look at the pandas types API. Well, there we go. This is probably a bit better. We can see this here. So pandas.api.types. Where can we have a look at this? Utility functions, data types, related functionality. So here we go. Let's copy this, but let's just read it out first. What's going on here? D-type introspection. So D-types is bool type, is categorical type. Okay, pandas D-type. Convert input into a pandas only D-type object or NumPy data type object. Okay, so we've got a fair few options here to have a look at different data types with pandas. But since we're focusing on converting strings to categories, let's see how we do that. Let's put a little link here. We can check the different data types compatible with pandas here. So remember, a lot of machine learning is basically getting some data, what we got here, and then preparing it to run with an existing machine learning model that we've chosen from our machine learning map isn't here. So it's about getting some inputs, aka a whole bunch of data that we've got here, all this sort of stuff here, and then massaging it, or essentially, yeah, that's a good word for it, massaging it into a way that it works with a machine learning model. So that machine learning model can find the patterns. Someone else has built this model for us, and we're going to thank them very much. And then it's going to find the patterns and give us some outputs, aka some predictions, some patterns, some labels, something like that. And then we can evaluate how well that works. This is what we're doing here. We're manipulating our inputs to work with our machine learning model. So let's have a look. Let's remind ourselves, dftemp.head of what we're working with. Okay, yep, we've seen this a fair few times. This is just another way to look at it. Always a good idea to look at your data. And so what we might do is try to use one of these API types. So what can we use? Is there a string one here? There we go. API types is string D type. How do we use this? Is string D type string. Okay. Let's try this out. So pd.api.types.isString dtype dftemp usage band. User warning. Why is there a user warning? Is there not a user warning column? I don't know. Who knows? I'm going to keep making that mistake, but let's check. Okay, so it is a string. The usage band column is a string. Now we could do the same thing for almost every other column, but why would we go through and write that much code? Let's build a little for loop that does it for us. So find the columns which contain strings. Because if we know which columns contain strings, then we can convert them into some kind of number and our machine learning model will be happy. So for label columns in dftemp, now I'm going to go through this one first and then we'll retrospect it afterwards because you might be looking at this going, oh, I don't know what dftemp.items is. But maybe you want to try it out. Maybe you want to pause the video and try it out and you explain it to me. Types, and if not, that's all right. We're going to go through it. D type. Now all we're doing is we're just copying something like this because we're trying to find all the columns with strings. And we're going to pass this, or actually, this is more content. That's what the documentation says. And we're going to pass content here. So does this make sense? You don't know what dftemp.items does unless you've checked it, but we're going to go for label content, and then we're going to check if the content is a string data type. Yes. Then we're going to print the label. Now you might be able to guess what this does, but if not, that's okay. We're going to see what it does anyway. If in doubt, run the code. And we got here. Okay, so these are all the columns that are string data types. Does that make sense? If you're wondering what dftemp.items does, it treats our data frame like a dictionary, which is kind of what it is, right? It's a dictionary of keys and values. Okay, the keys are the column names and the values are what you see in the column. So let's give a little example. If you're wondering what df.items does, here's an example. So we'll create a random dictionary equals, let's be creative, key 1 equals hello and key 2 equals world. Maybe you can be a little bit more creative than me, but we're going to go for key value in random dict.items. So see how we've got just .items? Same with up here. .items. We're going to go, we want print f, this is a key, and then we'll pass it key. And then we'll also go f, this is a value. Value. Wonderful. So if you've worked with Python dictionaries before, you might be able to tell what's going to happen here. Oh, what have we got here? Oh, I see. It's printed it out twice. That's all right. We can kind of get what's going on there. So essentially, what happens here is for label.content is basically labels are the column names and the content is the content of the column. So this is what this is doing. This is this brilliant little for loop. Tells us all the columns that contains the string data type. Wonderful. So now that we know that, what can we do? Well, if we were to read through our pandas data types related functionality, right, we're not going to do that, but it's somewhere in here or somewhere in there. Or you could also search up how to change the data type of a pandas column. One of the things you might stumble across with is converting strings into categories. Rather than talk about it, Daniel, come on, let's just code it. Let's see it happen. All right. Let's do it. So this will turn all of the string values into category values. And you're wondering, why would we do this? Well, it's going to make a lot of sense in a second. So for label, we're going to just bring the same for loop that we wrote up before, dftemp.items. And we're going to go if the pd.api, this is a fairly long one, types is string d type. That's a mouthful. So basically is the content a string. If true, we want to dftemp, we want to change that column. So see here, the column name. So we want to access that column name. We want to set it equal to the content. So right, keep the column name, but change the content to as type category. I need to spell this right. .cat as ordered. Oh my goodness. What is happening here? Well, let's have a look. What is going to happen? This might take a little while because we're going to go through a lot of columns, but we're going to preload our next Jupyter cell, right? Because we're pumping through this. Beautiful. dftemp.info. Have a look here. What is going on? What have we changed? I'll give you a hint. It's something over here. Well, it is this. So now these used to be objects. Okay, they used to be strings. Now we've changed them into categories. Well, that's interesting. What does this mean? Well, this is where we can have a look. Remember, we're trying to make sure all of our data frame is numeric. So we can't pass strings to a machine learning model. So this is what we're working towards. So dftemp. Let's check out, which one did we check before? Was it the state? Beautiful. Let's check that. So df temp.state.cat categories. Wonderful. There's Old Faithful, Wyoming. Shout out to Wyoming and every other state, wherever you're from. And every other country, to be honest, because this is on the internet. All right, so we have categories here. And what this is going to do is, remember when we did df.state.valueCounts? Remember when we did this? So if we were to go through all of these, because remember how we did up here? There's a fair few things we've just covered here. Daniel, come on, explain them. As ordered means these are now ordered. See how they're alphabetical? A, C, B. Oh, wait, no, there's no B. These aren't ordered here. Well, they're ordered by their value counts. But essentially what this has done is it turned it from strings to categories. So this is going to assign, when we call this, it's going to assign a numerical value to each category. So now, looking at this, it doesn't really make sense, right? Because these still look like strings. However, under the hood, Pandas is treating these as numbers. So Alabama might be 1, Alaska might be 2, Arizona might be 3. And we can check that by going df.temp.state.cat for category. So we're accessing the cat. Remember how we access the date time using DT? Well, now we're accessing the category .codes. Okay. So now we have a way that our data frame can be accessed. At least all the string values, right, have been now converted to categories. Because see here, we looped through our data frame and we figured out whether they're a string or not. And we've changed their data type to categories and we've given them order. So now we have all these categories here and we have a way to access their numeric value. Whew. Not bad, hey? I'm rubbing my hands together. You might not be able to hear that because I'm really excited. But even though we have a way to access our data as numeric, we still have a whole bunch of missing values. So let's write this down. Let's give some thanks. So thanks to Pandas categories, we now have a way to access all of our data in the form of numbers. Beautiful. But we still have a bunch of missing data. Let's have a look at that. Check missing data. So we got df temp.isNull.sum. Now let's get some ratios here, right? So let's divide it by the length of the data frame. So we've got no missing values in these columns here because these are all zeros. And then we have, okay, so not much missing there, but usage band has 80% of missing data, 85% missing data, 81% missing data, 52%. So, 93, my goodness. Maybe something's going on there. We'd probably have to, if this was a data set in the wild we were working on with a client, maybe we'd ask them. But since it's from Kaggle, accessing a subject matter expert is probably pretty hard on this data set. So these are some things we might explore a bit more, but we're on our mission to build a machine learning model. So what we might have to do next is fill these missing values. But before we do that, since we've made some changes on our df temp, we'll save it to a new CSV so we can, if we were to just start this notebook from fresh, we can just import our manipulated data frame and start exactly where we are now. So save pre-processed data, and we'll go export current temp data frame. So we'll go df temp.toCSV. We'll put it back in the data folder. So blue book for bulldozers, and we're going to call it just something simple like train temp.csv. Beautiful. We want to index equals false, otherwise we'll come up with some funny things when we re-import it. And then we're going to import pre-processed data. And now you could do this for whatever stage you're at, right? If you've made some changes to the temporary data frame, I just decided to do it now because it crossed my mind. You can do it whatever stage you're at. If you've updated some columns, if you've done some feature engineering, you can export it and re-import it that way. If you're coming back at a later session, you don't have to make those changes again. You don't have to run your notebook from the top. You could just run it from here. Oh no, we've just written it to file, Daniel. Come on, we want to read it now. pd.read.csv. This should work. This should re-import it. And then if we went dftemp.head, we should have the exact same data frame that we're working with now. Wonderful. And so, again, we'll just remind ourselves that we have a lot of missing values to deal with. Beautiful. Just because we exported and re-imported our data frame doesn't mean that our missing values have been handled. So that's probably what we're going to do. Well, it is what we're going to do in the next video as we work towards getting our data ready for a machine learning model. Let's start to fill some missing values.